Mr. President.
Senator from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be making a unanimous consent request in a second to bring up S-2650, the Corker, Graham, McCain, Rubio legislation dealing with the Iran nuclear negotiations. And Senator Murphy, I think, is going to speak here just in a second. But if I may, two things. I'd like to reserve 20 minutes of time to be divided between myself, Senator Corker, and Senator Rubio to speak about the topic. But I would now like to make a unanimous consent request.
Without objection?
I ask unanimous consent that at the time to be determined by the two leaders, but no later than November the 24th, 2014, the Committee on Foreign Relations be discharged from further consideration of S-2650 and that Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. The bill be read a third time, and the Senate proceed to a vote on passage of the bill with no intervening action or debate. Further, if passed, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection to the request?
Mr. President.
The senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, just to make a few brief comments prior to my colleagues speaking on their request in the underlying bill. It's my understanding that the request is to bring a bill to the floor that would create an extra constitutional process by which the House and the Senate would convene on a possible statement or resolution of disapproval on an agreement that has heretofore not been negotiated between the United States and our allies and Iran with respect to that country's nuclear program, nuclear ambitions. I think we are all of one mind in that we are hopeful that these negotiations are concluded successfully, that we are able to stand together and say that we have used diplomacy rather than military might in order to dislodge from Iran any prospect of obtaining a nuclear weapon. But we are at an absolutely critical moment in these negotiations. And I believe that the underlying bill, which is being asked to be brought to the floor today, would undermine those negotiations by sending a message that Congress does not stand with the president as he and his team negotiate these final agreements. There's going to be a legitimate question as to what Congress's role is, but we won't know that until we see the agreement. We won't know whether it rises to the level of a treaty. We won't know whether we need to pass legislation to immediately repeal sanctions versus having them temporarily suspended. This bill has not gone through the committee process, and while it raises, I think, some legitimate questions of what Congress's role is going to be if there is ultimately an agreement worked out between the P5+1 and Iran, it is premature at this point to set into law a process by which we would vote an agreement up or down until we understand what the agreement is in the first place. That is my primary reason for standing here and ultimately registering an objection. I do worry as well that it would send a fairly chilling message to our negotiators and to those who are in the room if the signal is that the United States Congress is not giving the full authority to this president under the Constitution in order to negotiate an agreement which is ultimately going to be, we hope, to the benefit of U.S. and global security. So I know my colleagues have time constraints and want to speak on this underlying bill, but with that, I would object to the unanimous consent request.
Objection is heard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate my colleague very much for speaking in a way that we could all have some time on the issue. Number one, about chilling messages. This is a pretty chilling message from the Supreme Leader of Iran about 3 days ago. 9 questions about the elimination of Israel. In this tweet, and I'll read some of it later, the Ayatollah, the Supreme Leader in Iran, talks about how to annihilate the state of Israel during the negotiations. Also, recently, an IAEA inspector has talked about elements of the Iranian nuclear program that have been hidden, but that would make it larger than we all suspect. What are we trying to do? I would like to bring the Iranian nuclear program to an end through peaceful means. And by end, I mean the following. I would welcome a deal that would allow the Iranians to produce peaceful nuclear power, but without the capability of turning that program into a weapons program. I fear that we're on the road to a North Korean outcome where the international community gave a rogue regime a small nuclear program to be monitored by the United Nations, and the rest is history regarding North Korea. I've asked several times the administration, tell me the safeguards that exist in these negotiations with Iran that did not exist in North Korea, and I've yet to get an answer. It's pretty openly known that the administration and the P5+1 have conceded a right to enrich uranium as part of any deal with Iran. To that I say, of all the nations on earth, given their behavior, name one country that you would put in a category ahead of Iran when it comes to denying them the ability to have a centrifuge that one day could be used to make a weapon. The idea of giving an enrichment capability to the Iranians, given 30 years of lying, deceit, American blood on their hands, and recent tweets about annihilating Israel, to me is insane. So all we're asking is that any deal negotiated between the P5+1 come to this body for a discussion and a vote. And Senator Corker is the primary author of this legislation. And here's what I could tell the world. Nobody wants any more war. But we do not want to allow the Iranians, given their behavior, a capability one day to develop a nuclear weapon. And that's exactly what they've been trying to do. They've lied about their program. They've been deceptive about their program. They have blood on their hands when it comes to killing Americans in Iraq. They're the chiefs, one of the largest state sponsors of terrorism in the world. The idea that we would give them an enrichment capability just astounds me. We're telling our allies, South Korea and the UAE, if you want a nuclear program, fine, don't enrich uranium. There are 15 nations in the world that have nuclear programs without an enrichment capability. To concede one to the Iranians is the ultimate act of throwing the Mideast into further chaos, because the Sunni Arabs, the moral enemy of the Shia Persians, will want a capability of their own of like kind or greater. The worst possible outcome is to give a regime this dangerous the capability or the potential to one day to make a bomb. One centrifuge in the hands of people with this mentality is one too many. And to my to the Iranian people, my beef is not with you. My beef is with your leaders who have taken the world down a dark path. This legislation is pretty simple. Bring the deal to the Senate. We'll have a right to file a motion of disapproval. We'll have a vote. We'll have a debate. And if it's a good deal, it will be approved. If it's a bad deal, we will stop it. I can't imagine the Senate and the House sitting on the sidelines and ignoring something this important. To Senator Corker, who will soon be the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, this was your original idea. We've tried to perfect it, but I really believe that what you tried to do months ago to make sure that the Congress would have a check and balance over any deal with the Iranians was smart. It would enhance the administration's hand when it comes to negotiating, because they would have to tell the Iranians, it's just not us you have to please. You have to go before the representatives of the American people. That would lead to a better outcome. And if it truly is a North Korea in the making, we'll have a chance to stop it. President Obama wants a deal too badly, in my view. But at the end of the day, let's wait and see what happens. I just want to let the Iranians and the administration know beforehand, we will not sit on the sidelines and watch you go it alone. This is one decision the president will make that the Congress has to be read in on and have a say about. This is not the time to let President Obama go it alone. The stakes are too high for Israel, for the United States, for the world at large. And what do I fear the most? I fear that over time we will give the Iranian Ayatollahs the capability to develop a nuclear weapon and name one technology they developed that they haven't shared with terrorists, and it will surely come our way. To our friends in Israel, no Israeli mother can ever go to sleep at night thinking her children are safe and the future of that country is secure if the Iranians have a nuclear capability. When the Ayatollahs say openly they wish to destroy the state of Israel, annihilate the state of Israel, I believe they mean it. When the Jewish people say never again, They speak based on past experience. Of all the scenarios in the world that could throw this world into a chaotic situation beyond what you see today, it would be to allow the Ayatollahs in Iran a nuclear weapon. The Sunni Arabs would want one of their own. Israel would never know a minute's of peace, and I fear that it would come our way. So I would like to now yield to Senator Corker, who could explain the details of the legislation, why we're asking this to be taken up before the end of negotiations. A week from Monday, the deadline comes to an end. I want everybody at the negotiating table to know that this deal is so important for the United States and the world that the Congress needs to have a say. Barack Obama should not be able to make any deal with the Iranians that's binding unless the Congress approves, and the Iranians should never be allowed to have a nuclear capability, period, that could be turned into a weapon.